Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the mornings. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, December 9th, 2022. Time for another show, and once again, things kind of going haywire here. Just some buttons, that's all. The ones that start the show or start the music that tell me to start the show, These unimportant things. Lots happening this morning. Some of it more important than other things. We have to, I guess, start by mentioning, one, that annoying person from Arizona, Kyrsten Sinema, has decided to be annoying again, but it's not as annoying as some people might think. She is leaving the Democratic Party, though not leaving the Democratic caucus in the Senate, I suppose is how you could describe what's going on here. Deciding to turn independent, which, politically, I guess she was kind of sitting there the whole time anyway. But, no, it doesn't change the majority making in the Senate, although obviously this thing is timed in such a way that you have to believe that what she's doing here is saying, all right, well, I don't like that I'm no longer a key leverage point, although she still really would have been a key leverage point. You don't have much of a margin to play with. This doesn't change, as I said, the way they can organize the Senate unless she does something really ridiculous and decides that she's also going to stop caucusing with Democrats in the Senate. And the announcement is that she's going to continue to do that. So that won't change anything. But I guess that's a fun way of saying all this attention for Raphael Warnock and everyone else, and I don't like that. There should be attention on me, so I'm going to do that. And I don't know. I guess she's got a piece in the Arizona papers about that she's written, why I'm registering as an independent. It might be interesting to read that and see what she says is the reason. But I think most people have already hit upon the more important reason for her is that she stood to be challenged in a primary in her next race and possibly lose in the primary to a different Democratic candidate. But essentially, instead of waiting until after she lost that nomination race to then run as an independent, she's just making that switch now. I guess probably to make the Arizona Democratic Party decide whether or not to run a candidate at all in the next election, or whether they're better off saying, well, what we fear would happen is that it would be a three-way race and Democrats would split their votes, Democratic-leaning voters would split their votes between Sinema and whoever the Democratic nominee was, and then you'd end up with the Republican winning the seat. And in Arizona, that could be anybody. That could be Kari Lake. That could be any crazy people. Although Kari Lake was originally approached to run for the Senate seat that Mark Kelly was running for, and she declined and said that specifically that for some reason governor was the thing that she was interested in. I suppose that will fall by the wayside if she sees that there's a career in running for office, and the one that's available next is the Senate, so I'll go and do that one instead. Who knows? I don't know where her ambitions really lie. I suppose president of the world president is going to take over the New World Order and, whatever. Anyway, Kyrsten Sinema, I think, effectively blocks Democratic challenges this way. Unless, of course, the only way it works, or the only way that it wouldn't work, really, would be for every single Democrat in Arizona to say, no, that's it. We've had enough of her. We're not gonna vote for the incumbent familiar name. And among activists, I'm sure that would be an easy sell. But among the rank and file of people who don't even really consider themselves party members per se, but are party voters, the danger is anytime anybody goes to the voting booth and says, "Oh yeah, Kirsten Sinema. I haven't read anything about her, but I know she's the senator now, and things are okay, so whatever. I'll vote for her." And besides which, I think she might be okay still on abortion or something like that. And then the whole thing falls apart. You see how that's going. All right, let's see. So I don't know. Do we care to read anything about the ins and outs of this whole thing? Well, let's see what Sinema has to say for herself. I'd be curious to see if she comes up with anything, high flighty rhetoric about why she's changing. Her piece runs in, I don't know. This is on Arizona Central, another one of those aggregating sites that doesn't identify the paper that it's actually owned by. What are they, the Arizona Republic out there? Let's see. There's a disconnect, she says. So this is why I'm registering as an independent. Okay. There's a disconnect between what everyday Americans want and deserve from our politics and what political parties are offering. I am privileged to represent Arizonans of all backgrounds and beliefs in the United States Senate, and I'm honored to travel to every corner of our state listening to your concerns and ideas. While Arizonans don't all agree on the issues, we are united in our values of hard work, common sense, and independence. USA America. Apple pie, puppies, We make our own decisions, using our own judgment and lived experiences to form our beliefs. We don't line up to do what we're told, automatically subscribe to whatever positions the national political parties dictate, or view every issue through the label that divides us. To some extent, people do that, in fact, but she's ignoring that for whatever reason. And, we all make our own judgment, and we don't line up to do what we're told, except, the real... what really drives this is, while it's not lining up to do what you're told, we do know that people line up to vote for the incumbent senator that they already have and whose name they recognize, and that's going to be enough to return her to the Senate, whether they actually like her or not. Anyway, each day, Arizonans wake up and live alongside people with different views and experiences, usually without even thinking about partisan politics. How long does this go on? Arizonans expect our leaders to follow that example. Yeah, sure. Set aside political games, work together, make progress, then get out of the way so we can build better lives for ourselves and our families. I don't understand. I guess how you explain how being a member of the Democratic Party for X number of years while she's been in Washington has been consistent with that, whereas at the moment it's really not because reasons. I don't know. So... Anyway, everyday Americans are, I don't know, this is stupid. We're not even really going to bother to read this. I'm so independent. I don't listen to anybody. And, if you value your independence, I don't know. So it seems like garbage. I don't know what her real reasons are or if she's ever stated her real reasons, other than to say, it just blocks the Democratic Party from effectively organizing against me because they want somebody more reliable and who won't constantly be playing for angles to leverage nothing in particular for the state, but only for, essentially for herself. Put her feet down and decide that she wants to run Senate policy. All right. So there was another piece, I think, when I looked up the news on this, that maybe the Daily Beast has a slightly different take on things. There's a lot of news analysis out there, but I thought I might dive in and see what they have to say. Arizona Senator Kirsten Sinema says she's no longer a Democrat. This is Dan Ladden Hall writing for the Daily Beast. And, don't worry about it. I can't tell you. No, I might have to pocket this and then read the pocket version. It's, I don't know. Not that late in the month to be running into paywalls already, but okay. Or maybe they always had a paywall. I don't know about the Daily Beast. Anyway, their piece reads, Arizona Senator Kirsten Sinema on Friday revealed she is changing her party affiliation from Democrat to Independent, a blow for Democrats celebrating their first clear Senate majority. It's not really a big deal. Oh, yeah. News first reported by Politico, I guess. And perhaps that's, well, as a matter of fact, that's all there really was behind the paywall. They were just saying she did that, and go read Politico if you want to find out more about it. Okay. I'll give a few minutes to Politico too. Let's see. Sinema switches to Independent, shaking up the Senate, Meh, not really. The Arizona senator won't say whether she's running for re-election. I mean, you would imagine that this is the only thing this is aimed at. But said in an interview she doesn't expect a change in how the Senate operates. So there you go. An ineffective shakeup of the Senate. Burgess Everett reporting for Politico. We've switched publications here. She switched to Independent, delivering a jolt to Democrats' narrow majority in Washington along with it. Not really. In a 45-minute interview, the first-term senator told Politico that she will not caucus with Republicans and suggested that she intends to vote the same way she has for 4 years in the Senate, which is annoyingly. Nothing will change about my values or my behavior because she's the one constant in all of this, the one who's switching something. There you go. I'm switching because I'm so constant. Provided that Sinema sticks to that vow, and who knows whether she will, Democrats will still have a workable Senate majority in the next Congress, though it will not exactly be the neat and tidy 51 seats that they assumed. But was it ever anyway? I mean, of the 51, there's Angus King, who claims to be independent, and Bernie Sanders, who claims to be independent. And well, I'm not saying that they're not, but that was 49 Democrats to start with. So, I don't know. They really want this to be a story. She really wants this to be a story. And it's just not as long as she says she's sticking with Democrats. Anyway, they're expected to also have the seats to control Senate committees. Sinema's move means Joe Manchin, a pivotal swing vote in the 50-50 chamber in the past 2 years, will hold on to some but not all of his outsized influence in the Democratic caucus. Sinema would not address whether she would run for re-election in 2024, informed Chuck Schumer of her decision on Thursday. I don't anticipate anything will change about the Senate structure, Sinema said, adding that some of the exact mechanics of how her switch affects the chamber is a question for Chuck Schumer. I intend to show up to work, to do the same work that I always do. I intend to show up for work as an independent. Big whoop. She said she closely held her decision to leave the Democratic Party, or that her closely held decision reflects that she's, quote, never really fit into a box of any political party. A description, she said, also applies to her fiercely independent state and millions of unaffiliated voters across the country. Grr, so tough. All right. So this seems to be garbage, too, and it doesn't really have anything here. Is there more about... Yeah, I guess here is where they begin to discuss this. Even before her party switch, she faced rumblings of a party primary challenge in 2024 from Representative Ruben Gallego. Becoming an independent will avoid a head-to-head primary against Gallego or another progressive. Should she seek re-election, a theoretical general election campaign could be chaotic if both Democrats and Republicans field candidates against her. Sinema asserted that she has a different goal in mind, fully separating herself from a party that's never really been a fit, despite the Democratic Party's support in her hard-fought 2018 race. That year, she became the first Democrat in 3 decades to win a Senate race in Arizona, defeating former Senator Martha McSally. Sinema wouldn't entertain discussions of pursuing a second Senate term. It's fair to say that I'm not talking about it right now, except what you just said. Well, but okay. Anyway, I keep an eye focused on what I'm doing right now, blah, blah, blah. I'm just happy to be here. Yeah, can't we all get along? I don't know. It's not even that, really. It's more like, yeah, I'm just taking it one day at a time. Okay. Let's see. It's been a decade since the last party switch in the Senate when former Pennsylvania Senator Arlen Specter left the GOP to become a Democrat, though, and even longer since former Senator Joe Lieberman switched from Democrat to Independent. Manchin routinely bats away rumors that he's leaving the Democratic Party. Sinema said she's not directly lobbying anyone to join her in leaving either the Democratic caucus or the GOP conference, as they love to call it, saying that she'd like the Senate to foster an environment where people feel comfortable and confident saying and doing what they believe. Hooray. What that means practically is continuing to work among the Senate's loose group of bipartisan deal makers, some of whom are retiring this year. She's already connected with Senator-elect Katie Britt from Alabama about working together. I mean, why? Right? I mean, hi, we're working in the same building. Cool. Great. I mean, I don't know that they have anything any policy. I should probably ask her, do you have anything we could do policy-wise together? Because I'm really looking to stick it to people, essentially. All right, well, whatever. She maintains a relationship with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy that could come in handy with a GOP House and a Democratic Senate. We served together for a long time. We're friends. Not a very long time. They may be friends, but whatever. She insisted that she won't deviate from her past approach to confirming Democratic presidential appointees, whom she scrutinizes but generally supports, and said she expects to keep her committee assignments through the Democrats. It's a nice expectation. She currently holds 2 subcommittee chairmanships. Nor, she said, will anything change about her ideology, which is more socially liberal than most Republicans on matters like abortion and more fiscally conservative than most Democrats. Sinema voted to convict former President Donald Trump in 2 impeachment trials, opposed Amy Coney Barrett, supported Ketanji Brown Jackson. Let's see. She supported 2 Democratic Party line bills this Congress on coronavirus aid and 1 devoted to climate, prescription drugs, and taxes. She maintains good relationships with Biden, so there you go, as well as Mitch McConnell, so yada yada, who invited her to give a closely watched speech on bipartisanship in his home state several months ago. Unlike independent Bernie Sanders and Angus King, Sinema won't attend weekly Democratic caucus meetings, but she rarely does that now. She isn't sure whether her desk will remain on the Democratic side of the Senate floor. And Sinema, who served 3 terms in the House, a long time with Kevin McCarthy, ages 6 years, and as a state legislator before her Senate election, said that Raphael Warnock's Tuesday re-election victory delighted her. Warnock's win will probably take some of the sting out of her decision for Democrats, but Sinema said she was not waiting on the results of the Georgia runoff election, which appeared to give her party a real majority for the first time since 2014. She wasn't waiting for them. She just did it after they were available. That's all. Her announcement is less about the timing. It's really about me thinking, how can I be the most productive? Sure. How can I be true to my core values, the values of my state, if you have any? And how do I continue being really productive but independent voice for Arizona? I'm sure that, whatever. But it's clearly a lie about the timing. Anyway, not that she wants any part in figuring out exactly how many seats they control now that she's out of the Democratic Party. I would just suggest that these are not the questions that I'm interested in, Sinema said. I want to see that it's possible to do good work with folks from all different political persuasions. There are 2, and I would like to work with those 2. And to do it without the pressures or pulls of a party structure. Garbage. Anyway, she approaches the Senate by looking for legislative opportunities to dive into head first, usually with a Republican partner, and those tactics bear fruit. She's cited her work with retiring Senator Rob Portman of Ohio on the $550 billion Biden-blessed infrastructure law as a model. In other words, I partnered with Rob Portman to pass a Biden infrastructure bill. Okay, you partnered with Biden. At the moment, she's executing a similar play with Tom Tillis of North Carolina on immigration reform, another issue that's bedeviled legislators for decades. Only I can fix it. All right, well, whatever. There's a little bit more, but I think you all get it. It doesn't change the balance until she says she's not going to vote with Democrats. And, I guess if she starts doing that, then I guess we'll see whether anybody decides to run against her or not and what Arizona Democrats do. Whatever. I'll just sit and wait and see how annoying she can be. And we all kind of know already. And she's decided to try and grab some of the spotlight. It's kind of a selfish thing to do. But what can you do? All right. So we wait and find out. Let's see. Other things of interest that I wanted to share with you today. Well, let's see. Let me go back into Pocket. I've been waiting all week to read this Murdery Trader Green profile thing, but that's going to take like all day, and I'm not certain how much we're going to learn from doing it. It is possible that we might, get something fun out of it. But then again, geez, I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't really pay to figure out how somebody like that really works. But I thought it could be somewhat interesting anyway. Let's see. So I'm going to hold off on that for just a second and share a couple of other things that I had put away that I thought might be of some interest. Let's see. I have to remind myself what some of these things are when they were taken from social media, and they don't display a headline in Pocket the same way a news website story does. Yes. Oh, okay. This one is sort of related to, in a way, to Murdery Trader Green. Here, I'm getting a fun phone call in the middle of the show from somebody who forgets that every single time that I am not available at this moment. Anyway, so let's see. We can move the vibrating phone away from the microphone and see if we can talk through this. Yeah, all right, well, we'll save that one for after we read about Murdery Trader Green. Here's another large-scale, important story that might be of some interest from the Washington Post, totally different in its focus. Democrats ramp up investigation of Kushner family business dealings. I wasn't really expecting that. I mean, at the moment. I was expecting that at some point somebody would probably investigate this thing, but the focus has been on the former guy himself, and they've sort of kept it there. But, it's sort of inextricable from the Kushner family finances as well. And, of course, he leveraged, everything about the Trump administration in order to improve the fortunes of his family's business. It bears some scrutiny, and I was wondering if he was just sort of going to get away with it forever or not. All right, let's see. Today's a good day for tea sipping. I'm just going to have to take a short break to do that. Try and get some soothing warm tea on the throat here today. And thanks to Scott, who has sent me another large shipment of holiday cheer in the form of teas. I don't have one of the new ones in there yet. I haven't rotated them in. But there's some wacky ones, some very weird herbal teas, including what looks to be a mushroom tea of some kind, which I'm a little hesitant to dive right in. Like I have some fruity, like raspberry thing here now, and I'm thinking, I don't know. Mushrooms are like not on my list usually for that. And then of course I'm thinking, what is that going to do? I'm drinking mushroom tea on the air, man. And who knows what I could hallucinate at that point. Not supposed to be that kind of mushroom, but anyway, lots of throat-soothing things. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it as always. I don't even know what else one day I'll get on and I'll read you all the weird ingredients that I got. And any of you who are tea mavens can chime in on which ones I ought to try when and under what conditions. But thank you very much. I appreciate that, and everyone else appreciates it too, especially if it can get me through the show with less throat clearing. All right, so now, just before our first break, I will give you a taste of what's happening here in the Washington Post. Democrats ramp up investigation, yay, of Kushner family business dealings, yay. Congressional panels, seek records about Jared Kushner's diplomatic activities at the time when the family's New York property was bailed out. It seems like an obvious target. It's about time. And although he's no longer in office, why not investigate it? And although you no longer have time to do it in the House, why not start? Only to say that the Republicans quashed it later. Michael Kranish reporting for the Washington Post here. And remember, they're not on strike. Neither is the New York Times today. But anyway, we'll catch up with them later. Democrats on a pair of congressional committees have launched an aggressive new effort to obtain information about whether Jared Kushner's actions on U.S. policy in the Persian Gulf region as a senior White House advisor, which was always kind of a joke, were influenced by the bailout of a property owned by his family business. Yes, they were. Citing previously undisclosed emails and other documents related to former President Donald Trump's son-in-law, the committees on Monday night sent letters to the state and defense departments requesting material that they say could shed new light on whether Kushner's financial conflict of interest may have led him to improperly influence U.S. tax, trade, and national security policies for his own financial gain. Well, he wasn't doing it for any interest in foreign policy. He didn't have any. The letters obtained by the Washington Post focus on efforts by Kushner and his father, Charles Kushner, convicted felon Charles Kushner, to bail out a troubled 41-story Fifth Avenue office building in New York City. The Kushner Company in 2018 made a deal with a Canadian company, Brookfield Asset Management, BAM for short, in case you were wondering. They didn't bother to say so, but it occurred to me. Anyway, which invested $1.2 billion for a 99-year lease. As a result, the Kushner family company avoided defaulting on a loan that was due the following year. Hooray for them. Democrats have long raised questions about the deal because the Qatar Investment Authority, a sovereign wealth fund, had a stake in one of Brookfield's investment arms. Brookfield said when it was negotiating its deal in 2018 that no Qatar-linked entity has any involvement in or even knowledge of this potential transaction. But Democrats have continued probing whether any Qatari money went into the project, because of course it did. Now, Senators Ron Wyden, or it's just one senator at the moment, Ron Wyden of Oregon, who, okay, fine, and Carolyn Maloney, Congresswoman Maloney in New York, who's a congresswoman and, like for another couple of weeks, in their roles as chairs of the Senate Finance Committee and House Oversight Committee, have broadened the inquiry, co-authoring letters to the state and defense departments. They wrote that they are seeking an array of documents addressing their concerns that Jared Kushner's role in the Middle East policy could have played a role in that bailout. And I mean, nothing was ever more obvious, but, okay. They've waited quite a while to launch this investigation, and Carolyn Maloney won't be around to conduct it. She, of course, having lost her seat in a primary against Jerry Nadler, and, of course, the Democrats having lost control of the House, even if she had won. So, it's a good gesture. It's something that she should get kicked off, and maybe she can spend a couple of weeks digging up some good dirt. We'll take it and see what happens after. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. The button's really just fighting me today. Anyway, let's read a little bit more about the Kushner situation, even though Carolyn Maloney won't be around to develop this storyline. Ron Wyden will. So we'll see whether he gives over time in the Senate Finance Committee, usually a pretty busy place, to pursuing this investigation. I don't think he's going to get any help on the House side. Neither Jared Kushner, who now runs a private equity company, which is really kind of what he ran before, nor Charles Kushner, who serves as chairman of the Kushner Real Estate Company, responded to requests for comment. The saga of the Fifth Avenue property has long been one of the darkest chapters in Jared Kushner's career. After his father went to prison, which is usually I would describe things in my life as would be considerably darker than defaulting on a loan. Bad, and potentially career ending, but your father goes to prison kind of ranks above that. But I guess not for Jared. Just saying. This is not Jared's description, to be fair. This is the Washington Post putting it that way, and probably accurately. The saga, of the Fifth Avenue property long been one of the darkest chapters after his father went to prison for federal tax evasion and other charges after being convicted in 2005. I mean, the other charges being wouldn't they hire a prostitute take pictures with his brother-in-law and blackmail him. I mean, the other charges are fairly serious, aren't they? Anyway, Kushner, who you may know is married to Trump's daughter Ivanka, remade the family real estate business. He made it into garbage and got themselves in trouble. Okay. He sold many of the company's New Jersey apartments and paid $1.8 billion for the Fifth Avenue property, the most ever paid in the United States for an office building at the time. Good job. Good negotiating. While Kushner called it a great acquisition, the purchase came just before the 2007 real estate crash, undercutting the value of the property and putting the family business at risk. As Kushner recounted in Breaking History, his recent memoir. Did you remember that he wrote that? No, probably not, because there was nothing good in it. So no one read it. There was no way I was going to let the investment fail. Oh, well, there you have it, everybody. So if you were thinking, how can I get into these businesses? What about the risk of failure? Just don't, if you just don't let it fail, you're going to be okay. I had very little leverage, so I was willing to talk to anybody. He called it the biggest challenge of his career. By 2016, Kushner was simultaneously helping to run Donald Trump's presidential campaign and seeking an investor to take over the property. There were overlapping goals. I want this guy to be president because if he is president and I'm associated with him, I can find a buyer to take over the property. A previously undisclosed email obtained by the committees says that Kushner talked with top Brookfield officials about the Fifth Avenue property on April 15th, 2016. A little too early. They probably didn't believe that Trump was going to be president at that point. The property at the time was known as 666 Fifth Avenue and is now known as 660 Fifth Avenue. Well, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, why they would do something like that. It was remarkably, well, it shouldn't matter. So I imagine they tried to overlook the thing, but obviously it did bother them and other people as well. So they had it renumbered. Anyway, 5 days later, in an email subject with the line Re666, Brookfield's then chairman, Rick Clark, Rick spells Rick without a K, by the way, R-I-C, Rick Clark, wrote, "Jared, thanks for coming down last Friday. We are excited about your project." That was a heartfelt note. Clark ended the email writing, "Congratulations on yesterday's election," apparently a reference to Trump's victory in the New York Republican primary, which helped him secure the nomination. Clark did not respond to a request for comment. In December of 2016, as Kushner worked on Trump's transition team, he met with representatives of a Chinese insurance firm regarding potentially investing in the property, the New York Times reported. Kushner also met with a Russian banker. This is some collection he's putting together. A Russian banker, but told Congress that family business was not discussed. So you are reading with a Russian banker for some other reason. Although the bank has said they talked about promising business lines and sectors, like the damn building. Anyway, then as Kushner began his White House role, he had divested himself of his interest in the Fifth Avenue property and cut ties with the family company where his father worked. At the same time, he retained real estate assets valued between $132 million and $407 million, the Post has reported. Everybody getting a real close fix on his financial situation with those great disclosure ranges. As Kushner worked on Middle East policy, his father in April 2017 held a meeting with Qatar's finance minister at which the Fifth Avenue property was discussed. That's weird. Charles Kushner later told the Post that even if the Qataris had offered to wire funds on the spot, he would have turned them down to avoid questions about conflict of interest with his son. It isn't that there would have a conflict of interest. It would have an alignment of interests. But okay. Jared Kushner played a significant role in policy affecting Qatar. He had helped persuade Trump to strengthen ties with Saudi Arabia during a May 2017 visit to the Arab nation. Remember their first official state visit being to Saudi Arabia, which was a little unusual. A month later, Saudi Arabia joined several countries in breaking relationships with Qatar and imposing a blockade, accusing Qatar of financing terrorism. Kushner wrote in his memoir that contrary to accusations by some in the administration, he was not to blame for the Saudi action against Qatar and tried to convince them to delay the decision. He then tried to work to lift the blockade against Qatar. He wrote, with questions swirling about whether Kushner used his influence to get investors to bail out the Fifth Avenue building. Wink, wink. He did. Charles Kushner, in January of 2018, gave his first interview about the matter, telling the Post that he had purposefully avoided doing business with sovereign investment funds or similar entities to avoid a conflict of interest with his son's White House job. A month after that interview, according to emails obtained by the committees, Charles Kushner talked with Clark, the Brookfield chairman, about investing in the Fifth Avenue property. An associate of Charles Kushner then emailed Clark with a summary of a proposed deal. 2 months later, Qatar's leader visited the White House, and Trump officials called for an end to the blockade. In their letter, the committees said the Trump administration's support for the blockade evaporated shortly after Charles Kushner's discussion with Brookfield. But they did not supply evidence that the two events are linked. The following month, Brookfield and the Kushner real estate company confirmed that they were negotiating a deal on the Fifth Avenue building. Both parties said at the time there was no Qatari involvement in the investment, which was finalized later in 2018. Jared Kushner did not mention Brookfield in his memoir. No mention of Brookfield whatsoever. It's the biggest, darkest chapter, and the company that came in and saved him from the darkest chapter, no memory of it. Sorry. Doesn't get written up in the memoir. In the waning days of the Trump administration, Charles Kushner, who had been convicted of filing false tax returns and other charges, wink, wink, was pardoned by Trump, and Jared Kushner traveled to the Persian Gulf region to finalize a deal to end the blockade of Qatar. The day after the Trump administration ended, Kushner created a private equity firm for which he obtained a $2 billion investment from Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. The fund is headed by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who the CIA said ordered the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, a Washington Post contributing columnist. They should strike. In recent days, Kushner traveled to Qatar, where he was photographed at the World Cup with some of that nation's leaders. Democrats, meanwhile, have repeatedly sought information about the Fifth Avenue property bailout from Brookfield and Kushner. On December 9th, 2020, Wyden co-authored a letter to Brookfield saying that despite Brookfield's assurance that no Qatari money was involved in the deal, it appears that is exactly what happened, and requested documentation from the company about it. Then on October 13th of this year, 2022, Wyden sent another letter, look out for those letters, to Brookfield accusing the company of stonewalling on whether it intentionally misled the public about the use of Qatar-linked funds to bail out the Kushner family property. Wyden alleged that Brookfield's initial assurance that no Qatar-linked entities were involved turned out to be false. Asked about Wyden's allegations by the Post, Brookfield issued a statement that did not directly address the question of Qatar's role. We have been fully transparent, except for not responding to your question, and responded to all requests, except by not responding to it. Well, not directly anyway. As we have said all along, the decision to acquire this building was based purely on its own merits. It was an iconic, underperforming building in a prime location in need of significant redevelopment, including a new number. The building has now been transformed into number 660, and we believe it will exceed our expectations in delivering value for our clients. We'll see whether they sell it anytime soon. The Qatar Investment Authority said via email that it would not comment. Qatari officials have previously said they did not learn about the Brookfield investment in the Kushner property until it was reported in the media. Subsequently, Reuters reported in 2019 that the Qatar Investment Authority would avoid putting its money in investment funds that it does not control, at least going forward anyway. The committee's letter this week marks the most aggressive request yet for new information. Rawr. Okay. Whatever. The committees are seeking all relevant correspondence related to the Kushner family company, Brookfield, the Qatari fund, the blockade, and other matters. In addition, the committees said they are requesting any correspondence that refers to Kushner seeking to influence, interfere with, or supersede the normal operations and responsibilities of the state and defense departments. Now, they may have something to say. That's where the focus ought to be. And we'll see whether other committees in the Senate side decide to take up this investigation as well. But nothing happened anytime soon for the next 2 years or so, probably, in the Senate. Unless, a bunch of Republicans resign, get arrested, switch parties, barred from office for insurrection. You're not going to see any action on this in the House for some time. Okay. So let's see. So many other things to read and look into, but I've been waiting on this one for a while. I do feel like I want to throw in one other additional item before immersing myself in Murdery Trader Green's story here. What was happening this morning on Twitter, which again, this time I'm part ignoring because I don't understand exactly what's going on, but also I'm just not that informed about it because I have been spending considerably less time on Twitter and trying really to make Mastodon the only social media presence that I do. I just don't, I don't want to contribute content for Twitter the way things are going. Anyway, the new latest weird twist on the story, as I understand it, one, there's this bunch of, quote unquote, investigative journalists who are very upset that people aren't paying attention to the Hunter Biden story. But as it turns out, they haven't been able to interest people in that angle of the Twitter files. That probably calls for dramatic music. Maybe I should have gone with the horror dramatic music on that one. I don't know. But anyway, the latest scaling up on that front is apparently Elon Musk has decided to share internal company memos and files, etc., with the people who used to call attention to themselves as the intellectual dark web. People like Barry Weiss, annoying person that she is, and others. Matt Taibbi, I guess, kind of fits into that same category. Anyway, they're all outraged that others of you are not outraged about something that they found. Anyway, it turns out Elon Musk spent the $44 billion in order to get a hold of not just the company. I mean, he's clearly not going to make any money with it anymore. So now he just figures, I'll raid the files and give away information to conservative-leaning activists to prove that they really were shadow banned, or whatever that might mean, or that their influence was somehow suppressed by manipulating the algorithm. And oh my God, no, not an algorithm manipulating what we see and don't see in social media. Who can, please? Oh, my delicate constitution. Anyway, she's on a tear. She's pretty sure that she's got the blockbuster story that, for instance, libs of TikTok was concerning people at Twitter, and that was because people were having their lives threatened based on what this person was tweeting, and they thought maybe that's really not great for the business and the platform or for society in general, and maybe we ought to do something like ban her from the platform. And I guess they're astonished to find out that people who are giving other people murder tips are being banned. And haven't you ever heard of free speech and something? So I don't know what kind of argument Barry Weiss thinks she's making. But what really kind of annoyed me about the situation was less the substance of what they were claiming, as I guess I go back to this. I think about this every once in a while, and we hit on this subject all the time, that it seems like on the conservative side, wingnut welfare takes care of everybody. People make good, nay, great livings, it seems, grifting off of the right-wing side, and you get people like James O'Keefe, who fancies himself the ultimate investigative undercover journalist, and he's carved out this very cushy living for himself on the largesse of conservative donors who just fund this stuff. And people are constantly complaining that on the Democratic side of things, you can hardly get anybody to fund anything. And it just, it strikes me, years after the fact that back in the day when we were working for filibuster reform and had the job of convincing everybody that was even a possible thing to do, and that was an uphill battle, you couldn't get 15 cents an hour to do that work. And over on the other side, you got people spending, here's $44 billion so you can rummage the files and write some investigative journalism pieces, about how you were, oh no, people weren't listening to you. It's obviously unconstitutional not to listen to Barry Weiss. We're going to find out what was behind all of this. So anyway, I find that quite annoying that you can actually convince billionaires to burn billions and tens of billions of dollars for you to, prove your point about something that isn't of any interest, but, filibuster reform or judicial nomination reform, stuff like that. Well, gee whiz. Maybe we can come into a partnership, and our billionaires, whatever that might mean, will give you 15 cents if you raise the other 15 cents yourself. You get the idea. Anyway, that's quite annoying. Meanwhile, you have the flourishing career of nut jobs like Murdery Trader Green. Let's talk about the Atlantic profile of her and try and see what they discover in looking into probably the best question. Whether or not they answer it, you never know. By most reports, no, they don't really answer it. You know how it is with headlines. They hold out these great questions and you say, I would love to know the answer to that. And this is such a long article, the answer must be in there, but I'm not certain that it is. But it's worth considering, and the title is in fact intriguing. Why is Marjorie Taylor Greene like this? I mean, that's really, that's a really good gut level question. On the Ground in Georgia, or in the Georgia Congresswoman's Alternate Universe by Elena Plott Calabro. And what an undertaking this piece is. Let's take a look at it and see how much we can get through. I guess this time we're going to have to read the pocket version of this one too. All right, here we go. Ready? We're just going to start out on this one. Although I think there's a note perhaps at the top of this one. This article was featured on, nothing in major, featured in one of the Atlantic's big newsletter podcasty kind of things, and that's of no consequence. Ready for the flowery language, the flowery literary introduction, part one here. She was very late. This is literary, isn't it? Wow. Anyway, a man named Barry was compelled to lead the room in a rendition of Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA to stall for time. That's a good way of doing it. But when she did arrive, the tardiness was forgiven and the Cobb County Republican Party's November breakfast was made new. She wasn't greeted, she was beheld like a religious apparition. Emotions verged on rapture. Later, as she spoke, one man jumped to his feet with such force that his chair fell over. Not far away, two women clung to each other and shrieked. I was knocked to my seat when a tablemate's corrugated plastic "Flood the Polls" sign collided inadvertently with my head. Upon looking up, I came eye level with a pistol tucked into the khaki waistband of an elderly man in front of me. She is just so great, I heard someone say. I mean, she is really just amazing. Ugh, kind of gross. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Murdery Trader Greene around here, arrived in Congress in January of 2021. Blonde and crass and indelibly identified with conspiracy theories involving Jewish space lasers and Democratic pedophiles. She had barely settled into office before being stripped of her committee assignments. By the way, she wasn't even in office when she was meeting in the White House about the insurrection to come a few days later. But anyway, she has been called a cancer on the Republican Party by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and she now has a loud, very loud voice in the GOP's most consequential decisions on Capitol Hill because her party's leaders know, and she knows that they know, that she has become far too popular with their voters to risk upsetting her. Nobody saw her coming. Not even Greene saw Greene coming. Part 2. She was a product, her family loves to say. That's an interesting way of putting it. But that's not the way they meant to express it. She was a product of what? Of the great American dream. Whatever that means. There was a 3-story home at the end of a shaded driveway in the small town of Cumming, Georgia, north of Atlanta. There was a finished basement in which Marge, and that is what she was called, Marge, and her friends would gather in faded nylon one-pieces after a swim in Lake Lanier. I don't know whether they say Lanier or Lanier. Anyway, her father was Robert David Taylor, a Michigan transplant for whom a 3-story home had never been guaranteed, but who believed acutely in its possibility. Bob Taylor was the son of a steel mill worker. He had served in Vietnam. He had hung siding to pay for classes at Eastern Michigan University. He had married the beautiful Carrie Fidel Bacon, Dell to most people, but he called her Carrie, from Milledgeville, Georgia, and rather than continue with college, he had become a contractor and built a successful company called Taylor Construction. For Marjorie Taylor, the first of Bob and Dell's 2 children, the result was a world steeped in a distinctly suburban kind of certainty. Packed lunches and marble kitchen countertops. Ooh, granite countertops, oh my God. No, marble. Semi-annual trips to the beach, and the conviction that everything happens for a reason. She came of age in Cumming, the seat of Forsyth County, with her turtleneck sweaters and highlighted mall bangs. Marge Taylor might have been any other teenage girl in America. She was any other teenage girl in America. And she still is pretty much any other teenage girl in America. And, has all the smarts that go with your random selection off the street. At South Forsyth High School, and I don't know whether they say Forsyth as we might in the North, or whether they say Forsyth as they tend to do in Southern Virginia when they have that combination of letters. We'll go with the Southern type pronunciation. At South Forsyth High School, class of 1992, she was a member of the Spanish Club. Oh my God, she spoke Spanish? Outrageous. Kick her out of office. And a manager of the soccer team. Not even American football. She may not have been voted most spirited, but she dressed to theme during homecoming week. She may not have had the best sense of humor, but by graduation she'd amassed her share of inside jokes with friends. Shh, it's the people outside. Her senior quote reads in the high school yearbook, "Run, the cops are here. I'm gone." Okay, so she was studying the whole time, and she didn't want to get caught by the knowledge police, you see. Anyway, she was, quote, nice to everyone, upbeat, with tons of confidence, no doubt about that, recalls Leslie Hamburger, a friend of hers and her brother David's. "I have nothing but good memories. The good but not great student," that's nice, was hardly, in other words, an overachieving scold already plotting her ascent to Washington. It's difficult to imagine an 18-year-old Ted Cruz bothering with something called the Hot Tuna Club. I could not tell you what the hell that's supposed to be, or why anybody would bother with it. Forsyth County was a calm, quiet, ordered place, but it had a history. In September of 1912, an 18-year-old white girl was found bloodied and barely breathing in the woods, lining the Chattahoochee River. She died 2 weeks later. Within 24 hours of her discovery, 4 black men had been arrested and charged with assault. A white mob dragged one of the suspects from his cell and hanged him from a telephone pole. 2 others were tried and executed. White residents then decided to undertake nothing short of a racial cleansing. On horseback, armed with rifles and dynamite, they drove out virtually all of the county's black population, more than 1,000 people. So successful were their efforts that the county would experience the modern civil rights era vicariously at best. There were no whites-only signs to fuss over in Cumming because there were no black people to keep separate. In January of 1987, a white resident organized a Walk for Brotherhood to commemorate what had happened 75 years earlier. The project was complicated by the immediate wave of death threats he received. Arriving from Atlanta, the civil rights leader Hosea Williams called Forsyth the most racist county in the South. Oprah Winfrey came down to cover the event, but most people in Forsyth ignored the whole affair. Broach it in conversation and you were considered a pot stirrer. George Perkle, the county's resident historian, was reminded of this as recently as 2011 when he readied for publication the Heritage Book of Forsyth County. He told the mayor of Cumming about his plans to include the region's black history in the volume and got an incredulous response. "Well, why in the world would you want to do that?" As Martha McConnell, the local historical society's co-president then and now, told me, the subtext was clear. Don't be starting things. In the end, the Heritage book did not go starting things. Look through it today and you will see the neatly arranged census data that cuts off at 1910. To include 1920, of course, would have revealed that the black population was suddenly gone. To go beyond 1920 would have revealed that the black population never came back. All of which is to say that Marge Taylor's worldview was shaped in a community artificially devoid of socio-cultural conflict, a history scrubbed of tension. That's the basic attitude here toward the past, Perkel told me. If you don't talk about it, it goes away. Decades later, as they considered her scorched earth rise to power, the conspiracy theories and racist appeals and talk of violence against Democratic leaders, some of her teachers would find themselves wondering how they'd failed to notice the young Marge Taylor. How was it that they had no memory of her holding forth in civics class or waging a boisterous campaign for student office? How could it possibly be that they, in fact, had no memory of her at all? That is an interesting question. And now part 3, as we begin the countdown towards our next break. She did as she was supposed to do, graduating from South Forsyth High and then packing up and moving an hour and a half away to Athens for 4 years at the University of Georgia. She would flit all but anonymously through the campus of 20,000 undergraduates. For Marge Taylor, UGA was about becoming the first in her family to graduate from college, setting herself up to run Taylor Construction. Almost certainly, it was also about meeting a nice man. Perry Clark Green was a nice man. 3 years her senior, he was tall and earnest and came from Riverdale. He, too, was in the university's Terry College of Business. They exchanged vows the summer before her senior year in 1995. That's early jump on the marriage thing, but okay. Among the things I do not know about Marjorie Taylor Greene, she would not speak with me for this story, is what her wedding was like. It's some kind of a question. A newspaper account, if it exists, has yet to turn up. I do not know whether she stood before an altar laden with white gladioli, as her grandmother once had, or whether the reception was a small affair at her parents' home in Cummings, or something bigger somewhere else. Maybe we'll find out a little bit more about what they don't know after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're turning it into the Murdery Trader Green Show, of course. Just to conclude that paragraph that broke off just before the break, remember, we don't know anything about what the wedding reception was like, and our writer tells us I also do not know whether on that day she was happy, whether the quiet and respectable life that now unfurled before the new Mrs. Perry Green felt like enough. I guess, why even speculate on such a thing? I guess what they're looking for is there anything of the traditional background of a political force to be reckoned with here? Was there always ambition to rising to this level? Was there any indication that she, was this restless and needed to try and take over the country by storm? And there's just none of the usual evidence of any interest in anything like that whatsoever available here. It just doesn't exist. The young couple moved into a 3-bed, 3-bath colonial with symmetrical shrubbery in the North Atlanta suburb of Roswell. Perry Green became an accountant at Ernst & Young, and Marjorie Green became pregnant. In January of 1998, she smiled alongside the other mothers with tired eyes and loose clothing as they learned to exercise and massage their newborns in the North Fulton Regional Hospital's Mother Lore class. Mother Lore, interesting. Okay, it wasn't long before Perry started working for his father-in-law as general manager in the family business. After facilitating the sale of Taylor Construction in 1999, he moved on to Taylor Commercial, a former division of the company which specialized in siding for apartment complexes and subsidized housing projects. Soon after, Bob Taylor named his son-in-law president of the company. So interesting that they were putting up siding on subsidized housing projects. In other words, government money, government housing, the sort of things that now she just can't wait to destroy some reason or another. Marjorie, meanwhile, tended to their 1, 2, and finally 3 children. There were lake days with Mimi and Papa, 3-week Christmas vacations in the sun, and annual drives to visit Perry's extended family in Oxford, Mississippi. A lot of time was spent traveling to fast-pitch softball tournaments. Taylor, the middle child, was barely a teenager when she started getting noticed. I can't believe she's being recruited in 8th grade, Green would write on her personal blog after a weekend at one university. As for Taylor Commercial, it was eventually bought by Marge and Perry. Financial disclosure documents filed in 2020, when Green first ran for office, reveal a company whose value ranged from $5 million to $25 million. There is a photograph that Green cherishes of her as a child, smiling alongside her father at a construction site. Bob did not want his daughter to see her inheritance as a given. Green has said that her father once fired her from a job she held at the company as a teenager, but now the girl in the photograph was chief financial officer of Taylor Commercial. Her college sweetheart was its president. Her family was by that point living in a tract mansion in Milton, which borders Alpharetta. Who could say, of course, how regularly she made use of the indoor pool or marveled at the built-in aquarium on the terrace level, 2 features of this smart home luxury estate, in the words of a recent listing, but she could at least enjoy the fact of them. That's an interesting way of putting things, too. But still, her first run for office of any kind in 2020. Probably didn't expect to be elected either. Anyway, a little bit like Trump in that respect. Okay, let's see. Another thing I do not know about Marjorie Taylor Greene, this is an interesting way of introducing a story about Marjorie Taylor Greene. I do not know precisely how long it was before the shape of her life, the quiet, the respectability, the cadence of carpooling and route touch-ups began to assume the dull cast of malaise. Or maybe it didn't, I don't know. Perhaps it was during one of the many softball tournaments, another weekend spent crushed against the corner of an elevator at the Hilton Garden Inn by grass-stained girls in monogrammed bat bags. Perhaps her age of anxiety arrived instead on a quiet Tuesday in the office of her multi-million-dollar company, when it occurred to her that running this multi-million-dollar company just might not be her purpose after all. Hey, I can sympathize with that, although it is interesting. I like the little anecdote about being fired from a job by her dad when she was a teenager, but now she's the CFO of it, And that happens a lot. A lot of times people just get jobs at a place and then they get fired and then they just, they get another chance and they rise to CFO. You know how it goes. Well, in a family business anyway. What I do know, our author tells us after dozens of conversations with Greene's classmates and teachers, friends, and associates, is that by the time she reached her late 30s, something in her had started to break. Now, section 4 here. Later, on the campaign trail, Greene would anchor much of her story in the fact that she was a longtime business owner, a woman who'd always more than held her own in the male-dominated world of construction. In beautifully shot television ads, voters saw a woman whose days were a relentless sprint between building sites, hard hats, reflector vests, jeans, and light-filled conference rooms where she wore dresses with tasteful necklines and examined important blueprints. That is not a fully accurate picture. People at Taylor Commercial seem to have liked Greene personally, but she spent only a few years on the job and did not put her stamp on the company. Call her on a weekday afternoon, and there was a good chance she'd answer from the gym. She had, quote, nothing to do with, unquote, Taylor Commercial. One person familiar with the company's operations told me it was entirely Perry. A 2021 article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution noted that the Taylor Commercial website during those years scarcely hinted at Greene's existence, although nothing else really hinted at her existence either. The only flicker of acknowledgement came in the last line of Perry Greene's bio, a reference to the wife and 3 children with whom he shared a home. By 2011, the Journal-Constitution reported Greene was no longer listed as the chief financial officer or any other kind of officer. A year earlier, The company had been hit with state and county tax liens. Green would one day joke about her lack of business acumen, but it doesn't seem to have been terribly funny at the moment. Green simply didn't love the work. She had grown up with this business, she had gone to school for this business, and yet the girl in the photograph, as it turned out, had little interest in running this business. And again, I don't know that I can blame her, and that wouldn't necessarily have been my first choice either. Although it is interesting that you get handed a business like that, and then you just say, well, I don't care. I'll extract money from it, I guess, and not much else. Anyway, but let's see. Some people close to Green would describe the ensuing dynamic, her own connection to the business weakening while her husband's grew stronger, as a source of tension for the couple. Marjorie Taylor Greene's path to Congress could perhaps be said to have begun here when, in the aftermath of her tenure as CFO, she appeared determined to strike out in search of something to call her own. She certainly wasn't taking responsibility for the business at that point. And just to point out again here, the thing to extract is the company is hit with tax liens. They're not paying their taxes. And the CFO, who doesn't care about anything, says, man, all right, fuck it. I'm not going to be the, almost got the whole word out there, right? I'm not, pretty close. Is everybody listening? Okay. Well, anyway, I'm just not going to do it anymore. Oh, we're hit with tax liens. Well, I'll find some other line of work to occupy my time with. Okay. Marjorie Taylor Greene's path to Congress could perhaps, we said, been said to begun here. She's striking out in search of something to call her own. In 2011, the same year she stepped away from her job, Greene decided to commit herself to Jesus Christ. Okay, well, why not? There's many things you could commit yourself to. It's not the worst, I suppose. Or recommit herself, perhaps. Last spring, Greene revealed, apparently for the first time publicly, that she was a cradle Catholic, as she puts it here in quotes, born and raised in the church. This disclosure was occasioned after Greene told Church Militant, a right-wing Catholic website, that efforts by bishops to aid undocumented immigrants reflected, quote, Satan controlling the church. In response, Bill Donahue of the Conservative Catholic League demanded that Greene apologize. Greene felt moved thereafter to share the details of her own personal relationship with Catholicism, explaining that she had stopped attending Mass when she became a mother, when she had, quote, realized, she said in a statement, quote, that I could not trust the church leadership to protect my children from pedophiles, and that they harbored monsters even in their own ranks, unquote. Well, she's not entirely wrong about that. It's an interesting place that she landed, but okay. Greene eventually decided to join North Point Community Church, one of the largest non-denominational Christian congregations in the country. And so, during a service one Sunday, as applause and encouragement echoed across the sanctuary, Greene awaited her turn to be immersed, blonde hair tucked behind her ears, chiclet white teeth fixed in a nervous smile. Many baptisms at North Point are accompanied by testimony in which the congregant shares a brief word about her journey to Christ. Video of Greene's testimony is no longer on the church's website, but the journalist Michael Cruz described its key moments in an article for Politico. From the stage that morning, he wrote, Greene spoke about the Martyrs book, meaning, I think, the Book of Martyrs, John Fox's 16th century history and polemic on the persecution of Protestants under Queen Mary. As she'd considered the conviction of such men and women, how they died for Christ, Greene said, I realized how small my faith was if I was scared to do a video and get baptized in front of thousands of people. Before those thousands of people, she accepted Jesus as her Lord and Savior. Greene's congressional biography leaves the impression of deep and meaningful engagement with North Point, but according to a person in the church leadership, her involvement tapered off after several years. This person noted, somewhat ruefully, that Brad Raffensperger, the Georgia Secretary of State who defied President Donald Trump, has long been involved in North Point, but no one ever asks me about him. That's interesting. Section 5 here. It was around this same time that Greene, as she later put it on her local radio show, finally got brave enough to step into a CrossFit gym. Green's original gym of choice had been the Alpharetta branch of Lifetime. The gym, with its Life Spa and Life Cafe, bills itself as a luxury athletic resort, and it's easy to see how Green might have tired of the ambiance. She is not, never has been, the kind of bi-weekly gym goer who walks for 45 minutes on the treadmill while watching Stranger Things on an iPad. In one of the few candid shots of Green in her 11th grade yearbook, she is flat on her back on a weight bench, lifting two heavy-looking dumbbells. "Marge Taylor pumps some iron," the caption reads. And they capitalize iron for some reason, like as if Donald Trump had written the caption. In 2007, a workout partner at Lifetime told Green about CrossFit, a fitness regimen that combines Olympic weightlifting with calisthenics and interval training. It has long been popular among law enforcement and members of the military. The two women went on CrossFit.com and printed out the workout of the day, or WOD in CrossFit parlance. Because those are the initials. It's not a great parlance. It's like a secret code or anything. This was in the early years of CrossFit how most newcomers engaged with the program, printing out the workout of the day and heading to their regular gym. By the end of that first WOD, Green was sold. In 2011, she started going to the CrossFit gym in Alpharetta. What Green found at the gym, or box as it is known, was community. The coaches, the members, the stragglers who popped in just to see what this is all about, they loved her. This is something many observers in Washington and elsewhere do not appreciate about Green, that she can be extremely likable, so long as you are not, in her estimation, among the swamp rat elites, spineless, weak-kneed Republicans, and the radical socialist Democrats who are the demise of this country that we all love and call home. She has, in fact, a sugary voice and is personable, generous affect. She is, when she wants to be, the sort of person whom a stranger might meet briefly and recall fondly to their friends as just the nicest woman. The softer side of Marjorie Taylor Greene is what her friends, neighbors, and the people who elected her know. Jamie Parrish, a Georgia Republican and close friend of Greene's, told me her supporters back home can seem genuinely confused by her chilly or hostile portrayal and reception elsewhere. At CrossFit, Greene's warmth made her a star. CrossFit's really intimidating, she explained in one radio interview. Most people's experience with CrossFit is they run across ESPN and they see these monster people doing crazy, amazing things. And they're usually like, oh, I'm never going to do that. But Greene could put people at ease. When she started coaching classes herself, the reviews were stellar. I loved working out with Marjorie Greene. Carolyn Canus, a former client, told me by email she was patient with my lack of athleticism and always encouraging and supportive to everyone at the gym. She would bring her dog to work with her sometimes. He was adorable, as well as her children, who were all down to earth and nice to be around. Greene trained on most days and competed in a workout challenge known as the CrossFit Open. At her peak, she was ranked 47th in the U.S. in her age group. Over time, she seemed to regard CrossFit less as a grounding for the rest of her life and more as an escape from it altogether. When Greene was running for Congress, a man named Jim Chambers, jarred by her self-presentation as a paragon of family values, wrote about her alleged extramarital affairs at the gym in a Facebook post. The New Yorker's Charles Bethea, I don't know how he pronounces his name, but he's, I guess, famous enough to refer to him as that. The New Yorker's Charles Bethea, whoever he is, later reported on text messages from Greene apparently confirming one of the affairs. I'm not dismissing Charles. I don't recognize anybody's name. We may even follow each other on Twitter for all I know, except I'm not on Twitter anymore. I'm sorry, Charles. I don't mean to dismiss you that way. I'll find another way to do it, I'm sure. Anyway, her first alleged relationship was with a fellow trainer. We've heard a little bit about this stuff. Chambers, who owned one of the CrossFit boxes at which Greene coached, recalled viewing her initially as this married lady who was at least nominally Christian, maybe not especially, but led a very suburban life. And then, quickly thereafter, she confessed that her marriage was on the rocks and falling apart. According to Chambers, Greene made no secret of the affair with the trainer. She talked openly about her problems with Perry, different lives and interests, typical stuff, as Chambers summarized it. She struck me as an extremely bored person, he added. Later, Green apparently had an affair with another man at CrossFit, a manager whom Chambers had recently hired from Colorado. This relationship, Chambers said, was more serious, more involved, a real affair. Green's office did not respond to a list of questions about the alleged affairs and other matters, of course. By March 2012, she and Perry had separated. 4 months later, she filed for divorce. 2 months after that, the couple reconciled. The family appeared to resume its ordinary rhythms. By January, Perry was posting again on TripAdvisor. This was no small thing. Before the separation, he had been in the habit of reviewing, with great earnestness, establishments ranging from the local melting pot, and a quote here, as stated, this is a fondue restaurant, so it is very unique, to the Cool Cat Cafe on Maui. My family loves their burgers so much we have Burger Sunday every Sunday as our family dinner. Okay, in Maui. Anyway, only then to go conspicuously dark after the sadness and tumult of 2012. But come the new year, he was back, sharing his thoughts about the Encore in Las Vegas. Great ambiance. Wife and I loved it. And an Italian restaurant in Alpharetta whose wine list he judged was, quote, pretty good. He really loves reviewing. Marjorie, meanwhile, worked with a personal coach in the hope of qualifying to compete in the International CrossFit Games. For the next 2 years, she would bury herself with his intense weekly prescriptions, all the while chronicling her experience on a WordPress blog. Test post, she began in April of 2013. I'm testing posting on my blog from my iPhone. See if this works. Scattered among the posts about creatine supplements, I love that stuff. And the iPhone footage of Green's triple jumps there are glimmers to suggest that her family had found its way back. I decided that I'm going to make a little home gym in my basement, Green wrote in May of 2013. This way, on days I'm not coaching, I can train at home and be around the kids. My husband thinks it's a great idea. Hopefully they can see mom working hard and I can set a good example for them. 6 months later, just hanging around the house this weekend with my family, and I'm really happy with that. Good blog. Much of the time, however, the blog post suggests someone pinballing from aggressive cheerfulness, totally doing the happy dance, to the negative thoughts that could rush in with no warning. I wish there was a switch to turn off those thoughts. If only life were simplistic and black and white in every aspect. Next section here. Confidence is also an area that I struggle in, believe it or not, Green wrote in one of her blog posts, but I've decided to say, why not me? In 2013, she set out to become a businesswoman again, partnering with Travis Meyer, a 22-year-old coach and one of the top CrossFit athletes in the world. Green opened a 6,000 square foot box called CrossFit Passion on Roswell Street in Alpharetta. 2 years later, they relocated to a space nearly twice the size. In 2016, however, Green sold her stake. She no longer blogged about her WODs or anything else related to CrossFit. It's unclear what prompted so abrupt a turnaround. Green hadn't discussed the subject publicly. She would go through a really hard workout and then just stop in the middle of it and start crying. A person who was close to Green during this time told me, and that started happening more regularly toward the end. It was just too much stress. Meyer, who went on to rename the gym United Performance, which he still owns and operates today, did not respond to requests for comment. The other thing that happened to Marjorie Taylor Greene in 2016 was Donald Trump. Green's family had never been especially political. Every 4th November, minus a cycle or two, Bob and Dell Taylor made sure to stop by the library or the First Baptist Church and cast a vote. It is reasonable to assume that the Taylors leaned right. For years, the family's construction company was a major sponsor of the Atlanta libertarian Neil Boortz's eponymous talk show. Boortz, one of the most popular radio personalities in America during the late 1990s and early 2000s, told me that Bob, who died in 2021, had been a good friend for decades. Still, the family did not give money to candidates, Republican or Democrat. They did not hold fundraisers at the house on Lake Lanier. For the Taylors, the 2016 presidential election commenced with no more fanfare than any other. On Super Tuesday, Bob, Dell, and Marjorie did not vote in either party's primary. In fact, Marjorie had not voted since 2010. Greene's political origin story was not unlike that of millions of other Trump supporters. Despite having never hinted at an interest in politics, she found herself suddenly beguiled by a feeling, a conviction that despite the distance between Trump's gold-plated world and her own, she knew exactly who he was. He reminded me of most men I know, she has said, men like my dad. In some ways, he was like her dad. Bob Taylor may not have been overly partisan, but he rivaled Trump in his tendency to self-mythologize. In 2006, Greene's father had published a novel with the small publisher Savas Beatty, S-A-V-A-S-B-E-A-T-I-E, Savas Beatty, called Paradigm. As best I can tell, this is Taylor's effort to demonstrate the value of a system he invented called the Taylor effect, which purports to predict the stock market based on the gravitational fluctuations of Earth in the form of a high-stakes international caper. Okay, the story follows twin scientists who discover an ancient Egyptian box in the bowels of the Biltmore estate, the contents of which, they soon realize, could, quote, destroy many of the world's most powerful families, if ever made public. I think we can probably add maybe the horror dramatic this time. Ooh, spooky. I mean, dumb novel like any other, but no worse than any other, I guess. I don't know. He considered his stock market theory, I guess there was a real theory behind it, to be the genuine article. In the afterword, he likened himself to Da Vinci, Galileo, Edison, Marconi, and the Wright brothers. There you go. History, he wrote, is filled with characters who endured ridicule. That would get you ridiculed. Imprisonment and even death because they discovered things we know today with absolute certainty to be true. Suzanne Thompson, a North Carolina author hired to help Taylor write Paradigm. That's an interesting approach to writing your first novel. Here, write this for me. Recalls that Taylor had a bit of an exalted sense of himself. She was unaware that he was Marjorie Taylor Greene's father and gasped with dismay when I told her, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea. Oh my God." Although Greene's political awakening was sudden, she would later portray her support for Trump as the unveiling of a well-formed political identity that she had no choice but to keep hidden. I've always had strong feelings about politics, but when you're a business owner, you have to be really, really careful about what you say, she told a conservative YouTube vlogger in 2019, by way of cover-up, I would add. But when she sold her gym, something magically happened to me. I didn't have to worry about what members thought anymore. Greene may now have felt free to speak, but it was not clear what she wanted to say. It was clear only that she wanted to say something. It was as though she spent the first 6 months of Trump's administration gathering up the scattered feelings and dim instincts that informed her attraction to this brand of politics and examining them under a microscope, twisting the knob until the edges came into focus. By July of 2017, Greene was ready to start posting about politics. That's a late start. She headed to American Truth Seekers, a now defunct fringe right website run by a New York City public school counselor who went by the name Pat Riot, or Riot, R-H-I-O-T, Riot with an H in it. The contents of Greene's earliest posts have been lost to the ether, but the headlines, archived by the Wayback Machine, summarize the brand Greene set out to establish from the very beginning. Caitlyn Jenner considering what? Was the first headline, followed over the next few days by Female Genital Mutilation, America's Dirty Little Secret, and Exposed, Confidential Memo to Take Down Trump and Silence Conservatives. By August, when the full text of many of her blog posts became available, she was establishing her fierce devotion to gun rights and Donald Trump, and her antipathy toward conventional Republican politicians. And now a quote. MAGA means get rid of our ridiculous, embarrassing, massive $20 trillion debt you all put us in. You see, we elected Donald Trump because he is not one of you, a politician. He is a businessman and a very successful one. We elected him because he clearly knows how to manage businesses and money, because we all know he has made plenty of it. Oh, but not you people. I'm not really sure where she thinks she's going with that. September saw her going after Hillary Clinton. You know how we all have that one friend or family member that shows up to the party uninvited and just causes nonstop drama? They lie and make up stories and shift blame to everyone and everything, but constantly refuse to accept reality or the fact that maybe it's their own fault. I don't have friends and family like that. Anyway, they ruin the party and make everyone miserable with all the crap they blubber out of their mouths while they try to push their agenda on everyone and no one wants it. Yep, Hillary. Can she just go away? Can she just go to jail? Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. What do you think so far? Are you finding this interesting? I mean, it's somewhat informative just in terms of painting a finer, picture of the details of her background. And I guess maybe, I don't know, do you take anything out of this? Is it possible that her interest in politics might evaporate one day, just the way other things have changed in her life? I don't know. I mean, she's found this as an avocation now, and very life affirming for her. So I don't know if she gives it up quite as easily, but it's an interesting thing that, I mean, really in an instant to go from, like, in 2016, 17, having your first real interest in politics at all, and then being like, you know what, I'm going to go to Congress. And you know what, I'm going to become the most powerful congressperson in the majority party. But with no particular grasp of what I'm doing or what I want out of life or how to do things that are political. And it's kind of discouraging, I guess. And by the way, over the break, I picked up on another thing, another long form piece in The Atlantic, this one by Adam Serwer, who always delivers, which, I don't know, somehow a little bit related, it seems, just in terms of like the worldview that people like Green carry with her, and another manifestation of that. I don't know. It's very interesting. We'll see if we get to any of it. Maybe it's something you can read for yourself over the weekend. Okay. So where we were was Marjorie's now first beginning to do active blog posting in the Trump era. Green's posts, by the standard of the 2017 far-right blogosphere, were more or less the usual fare. Nothing terribly new or uniquely provocative. And I don't think there's anything new or provocative about what she's doing now either. It is standard fare. It's just, it's like sports talk radio fandom. The best analogy, I guess, anybody ever, I think, made to, like, for instance, I don't know, Dan Snyder's ownership and destruction of the Washington Breadsticks football team was that he was just an average fan guy who, may or may not have had some success in other areas of business, and who just said, I'm just going to become the owner and I'm going to make the team do the things I want. And he evidenced no particular skill in doing anything or any particular insight into football. He just thought he liked it a lot. And, you should have passed to the end zone and made a touchdown with that one. Yeah, instead of handing it off, he should have thrown it for a touchdown. He should have, because then we would be winning. Yeah, but how do you do that? How do you accomplish that? Right? I mean, we see that all the time, particularly in politics, but in a lot of things. And so But what's amazing is that for some people, it just happens to work out. And then you're all doomed because your future is in their hands and they don't know what they're doing. So anyway, as we were saying, Green's posts, or as she was saying, our author here, nothing out of the ordinary or uniquely provocative. But Green, in her brief time posting, had already picked up on something remarkable. People liked that she was ordinary. In the present landscape of conservative politics, ordinariness was a branding opportunity. Ordinariness ensured that even her most banal reflections would sparkle. Ordinariness allowed Green to offer conservatives what the Alex Joneses couldn't. Affirmation that your neighborhood full-time mom and female business owner and patriot was fed up too. In the fall of 2017, Green created a new Facebook page exclusively for the dissemination of her political thoughts. Great. Newly discovered. I just realized I had some political thoughts. Now I'm going to market it nationally. That's what Facebook allows you to do. The Republican base was in the market for a Marjorie Taylor Greene, a suburban woman who not only didn't recoil from Trump, but was full-throated MAGA. All over the internet, it seemed, were women who claimed to be conservative and yet could do nothing but choke on their pearls and complain about Trump's tweets. But now here was regular Marge, who would put America first. Sweet Southern Marge, who loved family, fitness, travel, shooting, fun, and adventure. And who, as would soon be clear, wanted very much to save the children. Next section. Perhaps decades from now, what will stand out most is how easily the dominoes fell. Imagine it like this, and we've heard about this too. We've read a great deal about how MAGA and QAnon popularized itself and colonized like mommy blogging and I say that weird, but mommy blogging and fitness blogging and health and wellness blogging. And now we come to see that that's exactly the path that Marjorie Taylor Greene took to her MAGA status. And, so to the extent that you think, well, that was pretty dangerous because it's creating a bunch of loony people who are voting in dumb ways and that can have a bad effect. Well, this is how it snowballs very quickly into turning somebody into an actual member of Congress that can ruin things. And, that's where she came from. And so I guess in this sense, this backgrounder is really kind of helpful. I'm learning a little bit and understanding. I think all this was on the record, but this weaves it together as a more understandable narrative. So imagine it like this. The story continues. Hashtag save the children right there at the top of the feed. You click on the hashtag because who, given the choice, would not want to save the children? Who would not want to save the children? You would ask if you were Jerry Seinfeld. Maybe, maybe not. He denies it. And then, suddenly, you are looking with new eyes at the Chevron Wayfair rug beneath your feet. Chevron Wayfair, okay. It had been 40% off during the President's Day sale, but now you're wondering, had this one been used to transport a child, a trafficked innocent rolled up inside? Oh my God, that definitely deserves horror music. I didn't even realize, how crazy that whole, I remember hearing about the Wayfair thing and yada yada, and they had weird pricing on some of the items on the site, and then the theory became just like, okay, polenta means child molestation for hacked Democratic emails, so the weird pricing anomalies on Wayfair must mean they're priced that way. No rug is worth $15,000. This is, especially when the same rug, the weird anomaly, and this happens on online sites. Weird stuff happens. Some of it has an explanation and some of it doesn't. But the $50 rug that also appears for, same rug, $15,000, well, that must be because you're actually buying a trafficked child rolled up in the rug. Like, maybe if you're buying the child, they probably don't even bother giving you the rug at all. But okay. But this is the sort of thing that's occurring to her in her super powerful brain. Had this one been used to transport a child, a trafficked innocent rolled up inside, and then not 10 clicks later, you find yourself wondering about other things too, other conspiracies, other dark forces, because it is curious now that you're here, now that you're wondering that you can't recall any CCTV footage of the airplane as it hit the Pentagon on 9/11. You had to gone online to check if Teresa had posted photos from the baby shower. And now, 20 minutes later, you log off with an entirely new field of vision. The unseen currents of the world suddenly alive. Wow. Uh-oh. Perhaps for murdery Trader Green, the rug had been Houndstooth and the baby shower had been Kerry's. But you don't need the site-by-site search history to understand the narrative of Green's descent into QAnon because the basics are so often the same. And really, that's the story of Marjorie Taylor Greene right there. The basics are so often the same. QAnon followers subscribe to the sprawling conspiracy theory that the world is controlled by a network of satanic pedophiles funded by Saudi royalty, interestingly enough, who are pals with, Trump, but whatever, never mind. George Soros, of course, and of course the Rothschild family, who I never heard was Jewish, even though they have space lasers. You get the idea. And by the way, I'm now curious, was her father's descent into weirdness first? Or did it come from this, or what? Not sure. Anyway, though Republican officials have insisted that QAnon's influence among the party base is overstated, former President Trump has come to embrace the movement plainly, closing out rallies with music nearly identical to the QAnon theme song WWG1, WGA, the initials, of course, standing for the group's rallying cry, "Where we go one, we go all." Yet, since its inception in the fall of 2017, when Q, an anonymous figure professing to be a high-level government official, began posting tales from the so-called deep state, no politician has become more synonymous with QAnon than Greene. To an extent, Greene had already signaled her attraction to conspiracy theories, questioning on American truth seekers whether the 2017 mass shooting in Las Vegas was a false flag operation to eliminate gun rights. But with Q, Greene was all in. She had gone so far as to endorse an unhinged QAnon theory called Frazzle Drip, which claims that Hillary Clinton murdered a child as part of a satanic blood ritual. Of course. Ramon Aponte, a right-wing blogger known as the Puerto Rican Conservative, the only one they got, I guess, became friendly with Greene soon after she began posting about Pizzagate, the conspiracy theory that, of course, a Washington, D.C. restaurant was involved in a Democratic-run child sex ring. Of course. Even though the mainstream news media, quote, debunked it, nobody ever conducted an investigation on it, Aponte told me, and Marjorie Taylor Greene knew this. And she was the voice for the silent majority. After a North Carolina man's armed raid of the restaurant in December of 2016, Washington police did, in fact, investigate and pronounce the theory fictitious. Was Greene a true believer? Her early outpouring of breathless posts gives that strong impression. She comes across as a convert, intoxicated by revelation. But in time, her affiliation with QAnon brought undeniable advantages. It was not until she latched onto Q and Q-adjacent theories that Greene's political profile achieved scale and velocity. The deeper she plunged, the larger her following grew, and the more confident she became. As the months passed, she started experimenting with a new tone. Oh, new tone. Hashtag new tone. She would still be regular Marge and sweet Southern Marge, but she would also be the Marge who told the aggressive truth, who wasn't afraid to be real. In Facebook videos posted from 2017 to 2019, Greene talked about the Islamic invasion into our government offices. She said, "Let me explain something to you. Muhammad, what you people want is special treatment." Oh, I see. Let me explain something to you, Muhammad, like in general. Okay, what you people want is special treatment. You want to rise above us, and that's what we're against. She talked about how it was gangs, not white people, who were responsible for holding back black and Hispanic men. She objected to the removal of Confederate statues, saying, "But that doesn't make me a racist. If I were black people today and I walked by one of those statues, I would be so proud because I'd say, look how far I've come in this country." The most mistreated group in America, she went on to say, was white males. By the end of 2018, Marjorie Taylor Greene was awash in validation, especially from men. She found herself suddenly fielding marriage proposals in the comments beneath her selfies. Okay, so you're totally gorgeous. I got that the first time I saw you. Just letter U, one person wrote, but you seal the deal with what's in your head. I love the message of truth you bring and inform all who will listen. I'm sold. 3 exclamation marks, but exclamation points, but no commas, by the way. Green, as she often would upon reading such comments, clicked the like button in response. Green began to meet up with people from her Facebook circle. In March of 2019, she traveled to Washington, D.C. as the Senate Judiciary Committee held hearings on restrictive gun legislation. At one point, in a now infamous confrontation, Green began following David Hogue, a survivor of the 2018 mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. The shooting had left 17 dead, and Hogue had come to Washington to make the case for gun control measures. Wearing a black blazer and leggings, a pink Michael Kors tote slung over her shoulder, Green accosted the 18-year-old and, with a friend capturing the encounter on video, badgered him about his support for the bill. You don't have anything to say for yourself? You can't defend your stance? How did you ever get over 30 appointments with senators? How do you do that? How do you get major press coverage on the issue? Hogue walked on in silence as Green continued. You know, if school zones were protected with security guards with guns, there would be no mass shootings at schools. Do you know that? The best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with the gun. This is her big opportunity to be filmed confronting somebody who's now famous, unfortunately, on the issue. And what does she have? Nothing but what she read on the blogs, you know. It was garbage. Plus, it was an 18-year-old kid you were accosting. Just on so many levels, it was an awful thing to be doing. Green would later trace her decision to run for office to the frustration she'd felt during that trip. No one had paid her any attention. That would have to change. As she posted on a website called The Whiskey Patriots just after the Hogue incident, and just before she launched her bid for Congress, let the war begin. It is an interesting and revealing moment, too. And she was so frustrated. How did you do that? Well, you know, some organizers worked with them on it. I mean, people make a business of organizing and lobbying and meeting and working with members of the Senate and staffers, and then they bring people in from all over the country. I mean, it wasn't that David Hogue picked up the phone and said, I want to meet with you, and they all said, we know exactly who you are. But advocates in in gun safety who've been working those angles and working those corridors for decades called and said, we've got one of the victims of, one of the survivors of, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting in town, and they want to meet with you. And, the staffers say, we can't be seen turning that down, so we'll take the meeting. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, at this point, has no idea how any of that is done. And then 4 years later is saying, it's just 2 years after that she's meeting in the White House with the president's staff before she's been sworn into Congress to plan the insurrection. So, I mean, talk about that phrase I hate, meteoric rise. I'm so frustrated because I'm voiceless. No one ever listens to us. And in 2 years, she goes from having no idea how to get a meeting with a member of Congress to being a member of Congress. All right, next section. We're on number 8 here. Heinrich VIII. She ran and won, of course, on Georgia's 14th district, a largely rural outpost in the northwest corner of the state. Voters did not seem to care that Greene, who had judged the solidly conservative area to be friendlier to her chances than her home district in suburban Atlanta, had never actually lived there. Shortly after she was sworn into office in January of 2021, she figured that out. That's interesting. I'm surprised how quickly she figured out, I could move to another district that would be friendlier, as opposed to just everyone will believe me when I say there's children in the basement of Comet Pizza right here where I live. Anyway, that showed remarkable acumen. Shortly after she was sworn into office in January of 2021, her harassment of Hogue, as well as old social media posts in which she endorsed the claim that the Parkland shooting was a false flag operation, surfaced into public view. In her maiden speech on the floor of the House of Representatives, she set out to blunt the criticism she was receiving Much of the speech was a disavowal of her own past statements. She conceded, for example, that 9/11 had actually happened and that not all QAnon posts were accurate. I was allowed to believe things that weren't true, she protested. They should stop her from that. As for David Hogue, she recounted an episode at her own high school when, she said, the entire school had been taken hostage by a gunman, an episode that she continues to invoke as a touchstone to explain everything that is wrong about security in schools and how she has a right to browbeat a school shooting survivor like Hogue. But if her account failed to engender much sympathy, it was because it only nominally resembled reality. On a September morning in 1990, during Green's junior year, a history teacher named Johnny Talent was holding his class at South Forsyth High School when an armed sophomore entered the classroom next door, fired a rifle overhead, and marched the students there into Talent's classroom. For the next few hours, the sophomore held some 40 of his classmates and Talent at gunpoint. The hostages later said they were initially terrified. The student threatened to kill them if his demands for candy, soda, and a school bus were not met. It's almost as though it were a joke, but it clearly wasn't. Eventually, their nerves quieted. Many of the students knew their captor, at least somewhat, and they weren't altogether surprised when he put down his gun and began sharing with them everything that was going on in his head, as one hostage recalled. He said he wanted to get away from things and make a point, recalled another, adding that the student had repeatedly promised not to hurt them. He said his parents were mean and he was tired of how they treated him and that he had no friends and just wanted to get away. Gradually, as police delivered the snacks he'd asked for, the sophomore let most of the hostages go, including all the girls but one, who knew the student well and stayed behind to keep talking to him. 5 hours in, when the remaining hostages moved to grab his gun, he did not resist. When the police burst in moments later, he did not fight back. Talent recalls that Green reached out to him sometime before she launched her bid for Congress in the spring of 2019. He had no idea who she was or why she was calling him at home. He listened that day to as the unfamiliar woman explained that she wanted to speak with him about the events of 1990, that she'd been a student at South Forsyth when everything happened. Still, Talent struggled to place her. Green had not been in his classroom. Everyone else at the school, including Green, had been quickly evacuated and bussed away. Talent was taken aback by Green's intensity, her apparent sudden need, decades later, to discover flaws in the school's handling of things. She was asking me some crazy questions about saying we should have had guns ourselves, you know? She sounded kind of like a nut. Talent would not give her what she wanted. I told her right off, we didn't need guns, he said. It wasn't a political statement. For Talent, it was just reality. The only conclusion you could draw if you took care to examine the particulars of the crisis of the teenage boy at the center of it. The sophomore was known by classmates and teachers to struggle with seizures and other symptoms of epilepsy. As one of the hostages later put it, I wasn't scared of him. I was scared of what the police would do when he stepped into the hall, and I was afraid of what the police were planning to do as he walked from the room to the bus. But never mind. Green hung up with Talent and eventually proceeded with her preferred version of the story in her speech on the House floor. You see, school shootings are absolutely real, Green said in her navy face mask emblazoned with the words free speech in red letters. I understand how terrible it is because when I was 16 years old in 11th grade, my school was a gun-free school zone and one of my schoolmates brought guns to school and took our entire school hostage. Not really. Anyway, I know the fear that David Hogue had that day, she pronounced. I know the fear that these kids have. Did it even matter that Green had not been taken hostage, or that the episode had been handled wisely and without bloodshed, or that the teacher in the classroom had told her she was wrong about her memories and her conclusions? By now, it may have occurred to Green that performance was enough. That politics might in fact be that easy. As long as you were angry, or at least good at acting like it, most people wouldn't bother to look beneath the hood. Section 9, coming up in late September of 2022. Perry Green filed for divorce from Marjorie Taylor Greene on the grounds that the marriage was irretrievably broken. His timing, so close to the midterm election, did not go unnoticed in Georgia political circles. 6 weeks later, on November 8th, Marjorie easily won re-election to her second term in the House of Representatives. Given her popularity among a segment of the Republican base, she is certain to play a major role in the GOP leadership, whether that role comes with a specific title and an assignment or not. She wields power much like Donald Trump, doing or saying the unthinkable because she knows that most of her colleagues wouldn't dare jeopardize their own future to stop her. What Murdery Trader Greene has accomplished is this. She has harnessed the paranoia inherent in conspiratorial thinking and reassured a significant swath of voters that this is okay. No, righteous. To indulge their suspicions about the left, the Republican establishment, the media. I'm not going to mince words with you all, she declared at a Michigan rally this fall. Democrats want Republicans dead, and they've already started the killings. It's that last part that we have problems with. Greene did not create this sensibility, but she channels it better than any of her colleagues. In her speech at the Cobb County GOP breakfast, Greene bemoaned the major media organizations for creating a caricature, if you will, of her that's not real, without ever, she said, giving her the chance to speak for herself. She just declines to comment when they do. Afterward, I introduced myself, noted what she had just said, and asked if she was willing to sit down for an interview. Oh, she said, you're the one that's going around trying to talk to all my friends. This is the first time you've actually tried to talk to me. I explained that I had tried, but I'd been repeatedly turned away by her staff. Yeah, because I'm not interested, she snapped. You're a Democrat activist. Some of her supporters, looking on, nodding with vigor. Whether Greene actually believes the things she says is by now almost beside the point. She has no choice but to be the person her followers think she is, because her power is contingent on theirs. The mechanics of actual leadership, diplomacy, compromise, patience, not only don't interest her, but represent everything her followers disdain. To soften or engage in better faith is to admit defeat. I often think of Greene's blog post from July 26, 2014, and the question she posed to herself during her crisis of confidence. Why not me? She had written tentatively, trying it on for size. I think of it whenever I see Greene on stage, on YouTube, or on the House floor, making performance art out of rage and so clearly at ease with what she is. Were the question not in writing, I'm not sure I'd believe there was a time in her life when she'd been afraid to ask. Interesting, and an interesting conclusion to all this. By the way, I had this other thing available, a Twitter thread from, let me see if I can open up the right one and share it with you before we run out of time. Tom Nichols, on Twitter, Greg cites him all the time, Radio Free Tom. But something that I think goes to this profile, even if it wasn't necessarily about her. It might have been. Let's see. Among many reasons, the rest of us have had a hard time comprehending the descent of so many Americans into mass psychosis is a belief that anyone who embraces such nuttery must have traumatic reasons for doing so. But it's affluence and plenty, not trauma, that led us here. This was a reason I was blocked for a time trying to write Our Own Worst Enemy, his book. I wanted very much to take seriously the economic and social arguments about decline and hardship and all that made by both the right and the left about why people were turning against democracy. It's a very popular theme. Even though we dismiss it jokingly sometimes, economic anxiety. But then there was a very real thing about, for instance, well, it's not fair that you call this white privilege. I'm not privileged. I had a hard scrabble bringing up and yada, yada, all this sort of thing. Well, this is an interesting difference, a different angle on all this. I read with great care, Tom says, as a working scholar, several works about liberal democracy and why it wasn't working. It took a while before I just put them all down and realized most of them were basically hooey, especially the ones about the elites and yada, yada, yada. No real offer of proof here, but maybe in the book. Anyway, because the problem staring right at us was that the threat was from people who were part of the dominant economic and political class. Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene's background here. They were not part of the cultural elite, but never had been. And revisiting Hoffer and others, I realized we had our answer, but hated it. The danger was not some unemployed guy on opioids. It was from a bored woman named Marge who was tired of being married to a rich guy, and having affairs at the CrossFit gym. But to realize this is to realize that the problem is huge and perhaps impossible to solve. Americans love problems we can fix. I'm late with my outro music here. We love problems that we can fix. If only we cared more about the empty towns. If only we spent more on addiction. If only we could bring back good jobs. But what if none of that will work? That's the scary part, so we reject it. There is no bill you can pass, no social program that will solve the problem of a dentist or realtor who has decided that life is just too goddamn dull and they're going to spice up their week by getting some tactical gear and cosplaying the Second Civil War. This is why I switched gears early on when writing Our Own Worst Enemy. If we've learned anything since 2017, it's that the initial arguments about elitism and economics were very wrong. This is a civic vacuity that comes from peace, affluence, and high standards of living. There's an awful lot more to it, and I'm not going to get all the way through it, but I thought that was some interesting thought process and something worth considering. He goes on to say this doesn't mean we're hopeless, but we have to stop thinking we can fix or legislate our way out of this by rebuilding the downtown of East Cupcake or by handing out free college. Oh, I don't know. Those ships have sailed. The way out is harder, if simpler. I don't know if free college was going to solve all of this, but it was going to solve some major problems. He's got some suggestions. You can see whether you think they're worth your time, or you can stay tuned, of course, and hear some suggestions that are worth your time from Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Well, he'll be taking up the Brittany Griner deal and the Paul Whelan angle on all of that. Well, I would like to discuss that perhaps again on Monday. I know that Darwin had some suggestions on angles on that. Greg wants to talk about it as well. I think a good start heading into the weekend. Listen to Justice and his take on it next.